Greetings, it's your favorite visual effects artist Jack Wong here again with another tutorial. Today's tutorial is covering the creation of gore caps or meat caps, as you can see here. Now these are for when a creature, or in this case an armor that a character can wear, gets dismembered, and rather than there being some gaping hole, we have a mesh that's left in place to show the tear and also to cover the hole that would appear with a gore cap. Alright, and this tutorial does not only work for modding, it does work for development as well, as we follow some of the basic workflow, the generic pipeline that is applicable to different methods and engines and whatnot, and the tools you use. We are going to go over a little bit of UV unwrapping, a bit of skinning and rigging, and a bit more. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start right in. Now, on this side here, since this is for Fallout New Vegas, I am using Blender 2.49b. You can use any version of Blender, even Blender 2.9, available on Steam. It doesn't really matter. Okay, well, the first thing, when we import our NIF, this is the armor that you see on the left here. I've imported it to Blender. When we first import it, the default layout is going to show it as unrendered, and we cannot see the UV. So let's start there. Right-click on this partition line here, choose Split Area, split it upwards. And now you can see we have two render windows, but let's change the new one to be the UV editor. And now we can manipulate the UV, which we will need here in a moment. Another thing, you can't see the texture on the model right now, but the keyboard shortcut to switch the view from a solid shape, solid rendering, to textured is Alt-Z. Press Alt-Z and it will go between the two. Pressing Z will go between wireframe and solid. Next, when you select anything at all, whether it's an object or vertices or face, you can press period, press the decimal key on your number pad to anchor your camera to whatever you've selected. It will focus on the selection and keep it there regardless of how you pivot. Next, backslash. Pressing backslash will kind of segregate your selection so that nothing can impede your view. So if you just want to work on one part but there's multiple parts in your scene, press backslash to keep it separate from the rest, allowing you to just focus and modify that one piece. Well, let's do that with the arms here, because that's where we're going to be making our partition. You can see I've got one here on the legs, but I don't have anything on the arms. So let's do that. I'll press backslash to segregate it, and Alt-Z to get back into the solid render. The first thing we need to do is find out where this limb is going to split. Naturally, part of the arm is going to remain attached to the torso, and the other part can blow off and blow apart into chunks or just get severed and simply be sliced off. But either way, we need to know where that happens. And to find out, we should go into Weight Paint mode. And Weight Paint will show us in a colored gradient how the different vertices are weighted to the different armatures or bones. So for example, the upper arm, we can see it's weighted to that bone as such, and the forearm, and so on. Right here, BP right arm, that's body part. BP right arm, this is the part that's going to fly off, either explode off or get severed. And we can kind of see where the split's going to take place because we have solid red. It'd be a full weighting right here, and then it tapers off to blue, meaning no weighting, up here. To confirm that, let's look at the part that sticks to the torso section. You can see they share that same line. We have a full weighting here and no weighting here. So now we know exactly where the split is going to be. This line, I'll press Tab to go into edit mode. A selects everything, A again deselects. Works the same in object mode. Okay, so our split's going to be right here. Let's select these verts. You can press B to open the selector, or press B twice to get a brush shape selector, which you can increase the size or decrease the size using the mouse wheel. So we have our seam line split. We know where to split it, but as you can see here on the left side, we need more than that. We need the taper as well, because it's going to leave kind of a bloody stain above the taper, and then it's going to leave the skin chunks where the skin is torn away and flopping down below the split. We could select it manually, or if you want to select all the connected verts to our selection, we press Control and plus. And that will select everything that's connected to our original selection. And now we have a good segment to use as our basis for the gore cap. But it's still part of the arm, so let's duplicate these faces. Pressing Shift plus D will duplicate what we've got selected. Now don't move the mouse just yet. Doing so will modify the transform and put it in a different location. So immediately after duplicating it, click to set it into place. So we have duplicated faces, but they're stacked on top of the rest. So the first thing we need to do with our duplicated faces is scale it. We need it to be slightly larger than the arm so that it's not fighting to render. When two things occupy the same space, the renderer will kind of fight and flicker between them. Sometimes in games you see flickering textures for that exact reason. Two things are occupying the same space, and your poor GPU is struggling to render one over the other, and it can flicker or fight. So press S to scale it, like so. If you press and hold Control, it will scale it in increments. 1.1, 1.2, and so on. We need a smaller increment, 1.01. So if you press Control and then also hold Shift, it'll change the increment. Now this is 0.01 bigger. Click to accept, and there you can see it's kind of slightly larger than what's behind it, the faces behind it. Now we need to separate it, because it's still technically part of the faces of the arm itself. So pressing P will separate it. There, now it's a completely different object. We can do anything we want to the arm if we wanted, and it wouldn't affect these new faces we made. Okay, first press backslash to get back to our selection, press tab, well I guess I'll do it manually. There, go into object mode so we can select a different object. We don't need to modify the arms. Let's select our new faces that we have split. Right here. Press period to anchor the camera to it. Tab to go into edit mode. Alright, well the next thing we want to do is change the texture because it's still looking exactly like the arms. So one quick way to do that, if you've already got the texture you want imported somewhere in your scene, you can make it use the same material. The arms are using the material called default, as you can see down here. But the existing gore cap is using a material called no name. Let's remove the material on our new one. Now it doesn't have a material. Let's give it one. Tab, go into edit mode. Now this drop down appears, and we can select what material we want to apply. You can see from the itty bitty thumbnail that the red one, the bloody one, called no name, is the one we want. So we'll select that. The texture didn't change because we actually have to change the texture that we're viewing in the UV editor. So let's go over here to the UV editor and choose it from here. There's the armor's texture, the normal for it, the boots texture, and there's our meat cap texture. Alright, so we've got the texture in place, but of course it looks a little funky because the UV needs to be changed. This shape is pretty rudimentary, so there's an easy way for us to UV it. What we can do, first, come down here and switch to the edge select mode so we can select edges. And we're going to draw a seam, kind of like if you had a ring of paper and you wanted to unwrap that paper. The first thing you do is cut it straight, vertically, up and down to make a seam. Make the seam right here by selecting these edges that split it. Now, to mark it as a seam, press Ctrl E. And the first one on top, the default, is Mark Seam. Okay, even if we press A to unselect it, you'll see the seam shows up as a yellow line. So we do have a seam here. From here, we just need to unwrap it. A to select all the faces, because we want to unwrap the entire thing, and press U to unwrap it. Now, thanks to our seam, the algorithm it uses to unwrap should somewhat intelligently know how to do it. Click Unwrap, and you can see what I mean. It has somewhat intelligently unwrapped it as one long strip, as we really need it to be. But the UV doesn't match the taper, the blood, the seamless blood that we need. So let's do a quick UV edit. Let's kind of clean this up a little too while we're at it. What we'll do is select the top vertices here using the same selection tool method we used in the 3D editor, pressing B. Now I'm going to press W to weld them together, and I want to weld them on the same axis, the Y axis. And now you can see they're going straight across. I'll press G to grab these faces in the UV editor, and now I can move it all around, but I only want to move it upwards. So if I press Y, now I can only move it on the Y axis. We'll put it up here to that part of the bloody taper. A to unselect it, and I'm going to select the next row and do the same thing. W, align Y, G to grab on the Y axis. Now let's put it in the middle. Now the last part, rinse and repeat. Align it, grab it, and move it to the bottom of the texture. Right about there should be fine. And it's seamless. You can get nitpicky, of course, and you could manually grab them and ensure that there's no seam by moving it over. I don't think it's completely necessary. To me, this is kind of good enough. All right, so if we look at it, you can see it's a lot like the leg. Excellent. But there's one more thing. We need the cap in the middle, or else we're still going to see a gaping hole, like so, when the arm flies off. So let's anchor our camera to this and segregate it as well by pressing backslash, tab to go into edit mode, A to unselect everything. So we got to create the faces in the middle. You could manually do that, which would be tedious and take some time, or we can just select the middle, select the edge that splits it in two, like so. Make it a little bigger. Okay, now we've got this complete edge loop selected, and we want to extrude these faces, kind of make a duplicate of the ones that we have. So press E to extrude, and of course we want to do the edges, not the vertices. You can't really do much with the vertices, but with the edges we can build faces. So just like before when we duplicated the faces, we've made new edges here. So before you move your mouse, click it to set it in place so you don't wreck the transform. Now we want to scale it to bring these new edges together. S to scale, and I'll hold Control to do it in increments, and we'll scale it down to 0 so they all converge in the center. As you can infer, that means we have a lot of overlapping extra vertices stacked on top of each other in the middle here. So you press Alt-M to merge them at the center. We've probably got about a dozen or so here. So we're going to merge them all together, which will delete any unnecessary ones. And there we go. It has removed 10 vertices, leaving only the one we need to anchor these new triangular faces together. You might also notice that one of the faces got messed up in the process. That's fine. It's just flipped around. Not the face itself, but the normal, how it renders. So I'll go into face selection, and let's just select this messed up one. Go to mesh, normals, and flip. This will flip the normals on the selected face. There we go. It's all uniform now. The UV needs work, as you can see. So why don't we go ahead and work on that. Now we need a UV that's going to match the gore cap here in a circular shape. Two ways that we can UV this part. We don't need to draw a seam. We can let the algorithm do its job. It's smart enough to know that this is a circle. So we press U to unwrap, click the first one, and voila, we got a oblong circle based on the shape itself. It is relative to the original shape. or you can unwrap it based on the view you're looking at it. So let's say we line up the camera like this and go to project from view. Now it makes the projection onto the UV based on the camera angle. Even if I were to angle it like this, you can see how it matches the view that you're looking at it, which is incredibly handy in some instances where UVing certain parts can be tricky, or you just need to re-UV one little part and don't want to go through all the fuss of drawing seams and unwrapping the entire thing. You can select the faces and project it from view. I'll just stick to the default though. Alright, we want the shape to match the circular shape down below, so let's start squashing it. I'll press R so I can rotate it. Rotate it kind of like a lemon here. Scale it with S on the X-axis, so I press X. Make it a little bit more circular. Can we do better? Maybe. Rotate it once more. Squish it a little bit more. That's starting to come into place. Now this gore cap over here with the jugular and the spine is for a decapitation. This one over here is for a missing limb. It's got the tender, juicy meat in there and some sinew, muscle, and whatnot. So let's just line it up as best we can. Don't get too picky about it unless you're a perfectionist. I doubt your player, your viewer, is going to inspect it too closely to see how well you've done here. But this is good. It will suffice. All right, so we've got it UV'd. It's looking good. Let's go back there. Press backslash so you can see everything. I'll unselect it. Now it's starting to look like a proper cap, but we still need to re-rig it. We want to make sure that it's rigged to the body and will behave accordingly, move with the arm bones, and show up when the arm is detached. So let's start over. It's got a lot of groups, especially unnecessary ones, that we really don't need. Why don't we just delete them? All of them. Now essentially it's unrigged. There's no skinning data at all, and it's not really attached to anything, so to speak. Now, the first thing we got to attach it to is the bones, the skeleton. To do that, we select our new cap, press and hold Shift so that you can select multiple things, because we're going to shift-click this bone here. That bone, it doesn't matter which, just selects the skeleton object. We're not selecting an individual bone. Now we've got the gore cap and the skeleton selected. Press Ctrl-P to make it parent to the armature. Parent, child. Now this is the child of the skeleton. Don't create groups. We're going to do that in a different way. Also, that would create all the groups that are in the skeleton, which the right arm doesn't need. The right arm is not attached to your neck. So, it is childed to the skeleton, but it doesn't have any weighting or skinning data. So let's take care of that. You can see empty groups here. Now, a quick and easy way to do that is to copy the data from something existing, like the arm itself. But before we do any of that, let's just make sure 100% that we will avoid any fighting when it renders. So I want to bring the top out just a smidge further away from the arm. So select the top, S to scale, Control and Shift to do tiny increments, and 0.01. That will suffice. A to unselect it. Now I'll do the same over here. S, Control Shift, 0.01. There we go. I just want to make extra sure that when this thing shows up, it doesn't fight with the arms below, so we can clearly see the taper there. All right, looking good. Now let's do the data. The arms have data. They have all the groups. Everything we need is here. So we click that and shift-click our selection because we're going to be copying our first selection's data over to our second selection, which has no data. And we've clicked that, and we've clicked that. So now let's perform the operation. Object, scripts, bone weight copy. And up here, the only thing we really need to change is quality. We would like it to be as accurate as possible. Precision is key. So we go to quality 4, which is, for whatever reason, the top level of quality, and click on OK. We'll see this progress bar. See this green bar up here, copying arms, and done, just like that. It wasn't a complex NIF and or mesh, and there wasn't so many bones to copy, so it took half a second. For more complex things with multiple bones and a lot of vectors, well, it can take upwards of 10 minutes, I've seen. All right, now we have data on here. We right-click our selection, and you can see we got everything. In fact, we got more than we need. What we can do, just to tidy this up and ensure we get a good export, why don't we just remove the ones we don't need, like upper arm left. Yeah, I don't need that. And the spine data, yeah, it doesn't need to be connected to spine 1 or spine 2 or spine. It doesn't need to be connected to torso either. It's only connected to the arms. Left arm, no. Left arm, no. Okay, forearm left, don't need that. Clavicles, it's not connected to any clavicle. Not connected to the neck either. Okay, left twist bone, definitely not there. Fore twist, left. Okay, now you can see we've just got a few left, the only bones that we need that are rigged to it. Torso section, right arm, that's not what we need. We need it to be connected to the arm itself. So you can go ahead and delete that one as well. Also, we don't want it to fly off with the right arm, so we delete that. But we still need it to function as a cap. So, oh, here we go. Torso cap is the one that we need here. This is the naming for the body parts and their caps. You have section cap, which caps off the limb that flies off, and torso cap, which is the inverse. It caps off anything that is not flying off with the limb, typically anything that remains to the torso. So, press tab here to go into edit mode, and we need to add that new group. I'll click new, and I'll paste the name in here, and then a weight of 100%, and then we'll click assign. All right, now it is assigned to the torso cap completely, and that will tell it to only show up as a torso cap. And we have everything else we need in there, all the right arm data. So let's go ahead and check it out. We are ready to export. I'll select all with A and go to export my file. Yeah, sure, I already have one ready. For the export, you don't need the fade node. That's for statics and props and whatnot. For actors and things, it's just the 9 node is the root, not the fade node. We do want the dismemberment, of course. That's the whole point of this video. And we also want the skin partition. So with those two checked, we can go ahead and click OK. Progress seen up here tells you what exactly is exporting right now. Writing the NIF file, and done. So I already got it open, but let me reopen it because we've re-exported it with this gore cap. And there it is. Okay, first thing we want to do, let's rename it just to keep the naming convention. So like this is called body cap leg left. Let's call this body cap arm right. Arm right. Couple more things to do. For one, the shader. We need to change that because right now it doesn't use the skin shader. It uses the same shader that prop uses. What I mean is right here, skinned. If you double click, there's a drop down, you can select the ones you want. Skin is what we want. Or you can copy that. You can copy data from one NIF and paste it to the next. I can just paste it right there. Or of course I could select it here manually. So now it's skinned. Let's check the dismemberment. Just click dismember, look at the partition, and make sure that's the one. Yes, it is. That is the one we want. All right. I'm going to grab it here. There we go. Copy it, Control C, and we'll go to the armor that's going to be shown in game, which doesn't have it, and I will paste it right into the root. Okay, now we've got it in here. Excellent. why don't we go ahead and you can see it's got everything we need, all the relevant data, including the bones, and it is rigged to them. There we go. I'll save it, Control S. Now, for the moment of truth. We go in game, we'll give someone this armor, force them to wear it, and shoot their arm off. With luck, the gore cap will show up exactly as we planned. Here we go. Wait a moment, we almost skipped a step there. Let's make everything use the same material and alpha data. So, you can see this one, right here, is using the right alpha, 4844 for decals, and a cutoff, an opacity threshold of 127, and that is block 20. And the material, block 21. So 20 and 21. Let's just make sure that our new one uses the same one, because if this is the alpha, it could render a little funky in game. Alright, so I'll click on our shape here, and let's change that to the same alpha that the other one is using, block 20, and the same material that the other one is using, block 21. You'll notice that by displacing the alpha and material that was originally on there, it's now floating outside of our root. Not cool. You could delete it manually by clicking on it and pressing Control Delete, but sometimes you get a heap of things out there, and a quick way to trim it, right-click on your node, on your node, go to Block, Crop to Branch, and that will safely trim off everything that you don't need that was floating outside of the root. Alright, so let's save it again, and we will jump in game. Alright, here we are in game, and I have found a volunteer. This scavenger here has agreed to don our new suit, and let us tear the arm off to ensure that we were successful. Here goes. Okay, we've blown that off. Now we have to kind of pull it out manually since he tucked it in. And there you have it. We have our gore cap. Juicy. Now the same thing applies for creatures as well. So if you have